would you come here and join us? Maria Lúcia Uribe, Gilbras Aragão, Abdul Muti, Ravan Hazanov, Xiaoyin Zheng. And Xiaoyin Zheng is not here with us presently. Her participation will be through video. So I will ask our moderators to introduce our participants. Eu peço então aos nossos moderadores que apresentem os próprios participantes, né? Podem se apresentar e dizer a organização que representam, tudo bem? E agora eu passo a condução dos trabalhos para os nossos moderadores. I now pass the conduction of this panel to our moderators. Thank you.
Bom dia, good morning, buenos dias. My name is Caetano Dias Correa. I am from the Federal University of Santa Catarina. I am an associate professor of law at the institution. And alongside with Mr. Halim Mahfooz, we'll be moderating this panel. And I would like that the members themselves would like to invite the members themselves to introduce for us. It's better than me to introduce them. And first, I would like Mr. Halim to introduce himself as well.
Thank you. My name is Halim Mahfooz. I'm from Islamic boarding school in East Java, Indonesia, that managing students to understand others. Thank you.
Only to clarify, we will do a first round to introductions and then a second round with the speeches itself.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Matthias Ho. I'm the Executive Director of Lemina Institute in Jakarta, Indonesia.
I'm Abdul Mukti, Secretary General of Muhammadiyah, an Islamic modernist movement in Indonesia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Lucia Uribe, Executive Director of Arigato International, Geneva.
Então, Gil Braz Aragão, eu venho do Nordeste do Brasil, trabalho na Universidade Católica de Pernambuco, onde coordeno o Observatório Transdisciplinar das Religiões.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that we can also start the talk and the speeches, and I think that we can follow this order, starting with Mr. Matthias Ho, each one of you will have from 5 to 7 minutes to give your words. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think I'll continue from what I discussed in the plenary session. So I'm going to talk more in more details about the program that we call Cross-Cultural Religious Literacy in Indonesia, which is a teachers training program. So the program I talked earlier today about the concept of the 3 competencies in the cross-cultural religious literacy, where we believe that these are the 3 competencies that we need in a religiously diverse society, so that we can learn how to not only to coexist but to collaborate peacefully and constructively between people of different religions and belief, which basically says that I need to understand my own faith, but also need to understand other people's faith from the perspective of the followers, and how we can learn to work together even though we have differences, and we'll still have differences, and that's how we build trust and we build respect for one another's differences. differences. In addition to the concept of the cross-cultural religious literacy, we also consider the social psychology approach, for example, like the intergroup contact theory, where we believe that because what we are dealing is actually more about dealing with prejudice and stereotypes, because the program is not really geared toward making you an expert on religions, because there are already other programs in that. So what we do is that in 2021, we begin with a 1-week online program combining the Zoom and also with the learning self-study for the program. So what we do in that 1 week, where we invite the teachers to participate in the program, is that we explain the concept of the cross-cultural religious literacy, and then we, to make it more concrete, we also talk about different religions. Now, because of the time limit, and at that time, because we are in discussion with our partners, especially from the Islamic organization, the suggestion is that to talk about the example of the 3 Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So each of the session will have the speaker from that religion. So Islam will be explained by the Muslim scholar, Christianity by Christian pastors, and then also Judaism by Jewish scholars. So that's what the program in 1 week. And there is a Zoom element in that, because we want to have the teachers also have an experience of interacting with people from outside Indonesia, and then we use simultaneous interpretation in that. So that's what we call the basic course, the basic program that until now we have run 56 classes, and then we have almost 9,000 teachers already graduate from the program. And then in addition to that, we have advanced courses where we do, one of the advanced courses is how we give them a workshop. It's an physical in-person meeting for 3 days, where we train the teachers on how they can learn to integrate the principles in the lesson plans of the courses that they are teaching. So instead of introducing a new course, but how they can integrate this principle of relating with one another into the courses that they are already teaching. So the goal of the workshop is basically every teacher has to submit a lesson plans. And then after that, we encourage the teacher for them to send us a video of how they actually use the lesson plans to teach the students in the classroom. And surprisingly, even though it's voluntary, about 70% of the teachers actually send us the video. So I think to close this, because I think it's very interesting, because in some of the workshop, because now we have Muslim and Christian teachers in the program, and then later this year we are going to have Buddhist, Hindu, and Confucianist teachers as well. But in some of our workshop right now, we have Muslim and Christian teachers working together in the same workshop, learning on how to develop the lesson plans. Now I want to show close with a very short video of how an initiative that was done by Muslim and Christian teachers from who already graduated from this program, and then they initiated a program to bring the students from the Christian schools to visit the madrasa in Islamic schools for the first time, and then how they build relations. And this is really a completely initiative from them. We just found out about this, and then we sent our team to make the video. So if I may get the... Okay, yeah, please. So now this program continues between the school and the madrasa. They come up with new program like playing basketball together and other things. And then right now, this also inspire other teacher in our program. So now one of the teacher from a Christian school in a province that years ago had a very bloody conflict between Muslim and Christians, but now the Christian teachers who also graduate from this program wants to initiate the same program to visit an Islamic school because she said that this is very doable and this inspired her as well. So we hope that this will stimulate more initiative like this and it becomes a movement between the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. And now I give the floor to Mr. Abdul Muti.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I start my presentation, could you please also play a video so that we have different presentation in this session?
Ermelinda Ahale dari Prodi PGSD semester akhir, asal dari Kupang, NTT. Pengalaman saya kuliah di Unimuda, yang pertama saya merasa bersyukur bahwa walaupun saya berbeda agama dan juga profesi sebagai seorang biarawati, tetapi saya merasa bahwa tidak sendirian bersama teman-teman yang begitu banyak watak dan karakter yang berbeda. Saya merasa senang dan bersyukur bahwa di dalam perkuliahan ini kami saling mendukung, saling membantu. Saya memilih Universitas Pendidikan Muhammadiyah Sorong karena hanya di Unimuda yang memiliki program studi pendidikan guru sekolah dasar, sedangkan yang di lain tidak ada. Dan itu pun atas pertimbangan dan persetujuan dari pimpinan tarekat kami.
I have 5 minutes, then I only have 1 minute for the rest of my presentation. I just want to explain briefly about the concept and also the practice of Muhammadiyah schools and universities that actually building religious harmony and social inclusions. And the video actually explained about Anan, who is a student in Muhammadiyah University. And this is the experience that we call as building an inclusive and multicultural religious education. So in Muhammadiyah, just brief information about the organization. Muhammadiyah has 167 higher education institutions, 5,346 primary and secondary education, including boarding schools, and also more than 20,000 early childhood educations. So within Muhammadiyah schools, students consist from different faith, races, ethnicities, and culture. And when it comes to religion education, students receive religion education according to their religion, and it is taught by teachers of the same religion. Why Muhammad is developing this kind of inclusive and multicultural religious education? It is actually based on 4 foundations. The first is theological foundation. Religion is a natural disposition and dignity of mankind. Mankind has freedom or freedom of or from religions. Therefore, no coercion in religion. In the Quranic term, it is stated la ikraha fid din. The second is theoretical foundation, namely positive pluralism. Plurality of religion and cultures is the will of God. Positive pluralism is based on 4 principles: belief in religion or faith, respect and acceptance, facilitation and accommodation, and cooperation among religions. The third foundation is cultural. Indonesians have tradition of tolerance, openness, and harmony of religions. There are local tradition and wisdom relevant to teaching religion. The fourth foundation is political. Indonesia is a Pancasila state which recognizes existence of religion and cultures as treasures of the country. In line with the philosophy of Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, or unity in diversity, unity is not uniformity. In this regard, the state respects, protects, and facilitates people to have and express religion and cultures of all citizens. In practice, inclusive and multicultural religion education is developed according to three strategies. The first is head-to-head, which purpose is to make students have knowledge and understanding about their own and others' religion and cultures. Muhammadiyah with Laimena Institute and other partners organized workshops on cross-cultural religious literacy as one of example how to build literacy about other religion and cultures, as already explained by my colleague Matthias Ho. The second is heart-to-heart. That objective is to build empathy, sympathy, and acceptance of others. And the third is hand-in-hand, that aim at building common responsibility for common good based on common teaching of religions. I think that is actually the concept that we so far developed in Muhammadiyah education, and also with the partnership with many different organizations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Abdul Muti. And now I'll give the floor to Mrs. Maria Lucia Uribe Torres.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to try to be more practical to explain actually how we work on our ethics education programs. In the previous session, I gave more an overview of the importance. So Arigato International, which is a Japanese-based organization that works for the rights and well-being of children through intercultural and interfaith collaboration, back in 2003 brought together a group of experts on peace, education, children's rights, educationalists, peace building, but also representatives from several religious communities to think together what is ethics education, and if we want to have ethics education to contribute to interreligious and intercultural dialogue and learning, what do we need to do? So for 4 years, we came together, this group of around 20 people. It was what we call an interfaith committee, which was supported by an interfaith council, which was with UNESCO, UNICEF, Prince El Hassan from Jordan, Nobel laureate from Argentina, and others. And then we came together and started to sing together. So what is that we have in common among all religions, and how do we transmit that communality of values that are shared to children, and how do we do that? And so we did pilots in more than 7 countries, several regional pilots as well. And after 4 years, we launched a program called Learning to Live Together, an intercultural and interfaith program for ethics education that now is being implemented in more than 40 countries around the world. We have more than 400,000 children and young people have been directly impacted by the program. But throughout these 20 years, we have learned what does this mean and how we can make it more practical. So the program is inspired in what we call the ethical demand. The ethical demand was coined by a theologian, Danish theologian, Kung, that says that we have an ethical demand with one another, to care for one another. And what we say is that we have in our hands the lives of others, and that we do and do not do have an impact on ourselves and others. And if children learn that realization that they hold the lives of others in their lives, they have a better opportunity to be more empathic with others, respect one another, be more compassionate with others, and therefore being able to live together with others, and beyond that, able to work together with the other. And so we have this manual called Learning to Live Together that has been implemented in all these countries, and it has two modules. One is understanding self and others, and the other is transforming the world together. And so we work together with teachers, educators, on how they are equipped with a transformative pedagogy to be able to transmit this in the classroom in fun and interactive ways. The beauty of the program is this was developed together with children and young people, parents, caregivers. When we did all these pilot workshops in many parts of the world, we listened to what children had to say, what was fun, interactive with them, the ways they learn, how we conduct an interreligious visit with children, where other children actually welcome the children in their religious places, and they sing, they eat, and they have fun together. And they express their religion from that point of view, from meeting the other, the encounter with the other. Throughout the years, we have worked with several organizations, religious institutions, ministries of education. But in the last 3 years, we initiated a program together with CAICID, the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity, the Kamermes Foundation for Peace, and UNESCO to integrate it in a more systematic way with ministries of education. Because we know that we can work with for non-formal education, we can work in several programs that at times are ad hoc. We do a training, one program, and that's it. But we know that when we work with the ministries of education, there is a higher probability that this gets integrated into the system, into national teacher training programs, and perhaps in the curriculum. So we initiated this program in Asia and Africa, in Bangladesh, Indonesia, Nepal, Seychelles, Mauritius, and Kenya. And we trained several representatives from the ministry, a focal point, and 4 others that are experts on teacher training, either working with curriculum development. The critical part of this was that we wanted to make sure that it was not just one unit at the Ministry of Education, but we were working with several. And then we trained them, and then for 1 week, and then they went back to their countries to develop a pilot and work together with teachers and educators. In the first year, the pilot reached around 8,000 children, and we did a monitoring and evaluation process to understand the benefits for institutions, for the learners, and for the educators. The results have been very positive, particularly very similar to what Matthews was saying. Children saying, I have befriended a child from another religion, more openness, children addressing issues of bullying in the school and taking initiative to solve conflicts in more peaceful ways, teachers feeling more comfortable. We have seen increase in the well-being of teachers, and children from minority groups that feel more able to express themselves, because the focus of the program is in the pedagogy. So the transformative pedagogy, how you create a child-centered environment that is inclusive, where you can create dialogue, where you can develop critical thinking, but you can also encourage the development and the nurturing of ethical values, empathy, reconciliation, respect for the other, responsibility. And for the second year, this year of this program, we thought this is not enough. So we work with the Ministry of Education that this is good, but we need, 1, expansion to more schools in the country, and 2, we need to institutionalize this in the country if we want to see long-term results. So in Seychelles, for example, the president of the country came and said this is a priority for the island. The cabinet of ministers approved it. Now they have created a center on ethics in the country, and they are going to integrate it in the entire education system. In Indonesia, we are working with the ministry, and now they want to work with the Ministry of Religious Affairs to work also with religious schools, and they have been integrating interreligious visits also as part of the formal system. And I see my time is up. I can speak a little bit more of other examples, but what I want to say is that these changes that we want to see in children to appreciate diversity, to be more open to others, need to be maintained. And that if we want to see those changes, we need to work long term. So it's difficult to say there have been changes. Yes, we see small changes or maybe big changes, but maybe, as I explained in the plenary before, maybe 2 years later, those children will be thinking differently because societies and structures are violent at times, and children are part of the society. So how we work with the system, with religious communities, as Matthew is doing, and as religious communities as in Indonesia, to challenge the environment, to transform the environment in the community, in the family, social media as well, so that when children go through these programs, those programs can be complemented as well with what they hear, see, and experience in other parts of society. So I can speak more about that, but I think that gives an overview of how we have been integrating the program. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Gil Braz Aragão.
Obrigado. Então, há 2 décadas, criamos na Universidade Católica de Pernambuco, Nordeste do Brasil, um programa de pós-graduação em Ciências da Religião. Pesquisamos o fenômeno religioso, ajudamos a contextualizar as religiões e a traduzir suas mensagens para o espaço público e plural. Apoiamos comunidades religiosas no exercício do direito a uma fé esclarecida e respeitosa das outras. Por exemplo, numa das turmas de mestrado, tínhamos um bispo católico e uma bruxa da Wicca, além de pastores, mães de santo, estudando todos a história das religiões. Seguimos a tradição dos jesuítas, de colaborar com tudo que leva a humanidade para frente e para cima. Por isso, estamos abertos ao estudo científico das tradições de fé e à meditação mística sobre os dados das ciências. Acolhemos e promovemos o mais amplo ecumenismo entre os grupos religiosos e filosóficos que defendem a justiça e a compaixão. Em pouco tempo, porém, percebemos que nossa missão precisava ir além dos muros da universidade, mais aulas e pesquisas de mestrado e doutorado. Então, inventamos um site de extensão acadêmica, Observatório Transdisciplinar das Religiões no Recife. Vocês encontram facilmente esse endereço na internet. E, em torno dele, organizamos subsídios e intervenções para assessorar professores de ensino religioso e animadores do diálogo interreligioso. Temos um grupo online sobre transdisciplinaridade e diálogo, com reuniões semanais desde 2005, para partilhar estudos e preparar cartilhas e vídeos. Realizamos eventos que buscam fomentar encontros, como visitas guiadas aos centros espirituais da região todo semestre. E as sessões do grupo de pesquisa Espiritualidades, Pluralidades e Diálogos, que ocorrem nos congressos anuais das Sociedades dos Estudos de Religião. Fazemos assessoria às articulações de religiões e espiritualidades no Estado, suscitando o Fórum Diálogos da Diversidade Religiosa em Pernambuco e uma rede de feiras das religiões nas escolas. Participamos em comissões que promovem serviços em rede de promoção do respeito à diversidade nos espaços religiosos e públicos, como a Pastoral de Ecumenismo na CNBB e a Coalizão Religiões e Crenças em Diálogo com a Sociedade Civil na OEA. Por fim, temos colaborado na construção do Ecoparque das Religiões em Pernambuco, um museu em movimento, que vai educar para a interpretação das linguagens simbólicas e o diálogo entre as religiões e destas com as ciências, desenhando um lugar para acolher jovens que desejem conhecer o desenvolvimento das religiões, seus personagens divinos e palavras inspiradoras, os espaços, calendários e rituais sagrados, as visões da vida além desta, a vivência comunitária nas tradições, seus conflitos, sincretismos e diálogos culturais e espirituais. Nesses 20 anos de engajamento pedagógico, aprendemos que, em muitos casos, o conceito de liberdade religiosa é usado para mascarar o pretenso direito de proselitismo violento, normalmente por parte de grupos cristãos hegemônicos, com seus policiais de Jesus, seus traficantes de Cristo, contra os terreiros afro-indígenas, de negros e pobres, de quem se rouba as almas para melhor explorar os corpos depois. Então, a gente não deve temer laicidade, porque é garantidora da verdadeira liberdade de crença e convicção. Para uma sociedade crescer socioeconomicamente, o Estado precisa controlar proselitismos e regrar o uso de símbolos religiosos em espaços públicos, além de não submeter questões legais, como a educação sobre os fatos religiosos, a interesses de alguma religião privilegiada. Os cientistas da religião devem transformar o ensino religioso nas escolas públicas em aprendizagens críticas sobre as espiritualidades humanas, para que a meninada aprenda a respeitar a nossa diversidade cultural. E os teólogos precisam trabalhar nas catequeses e escolas das igrejas para que os crentes desenvolvam uma fé terapeutizada, capaz de conversar com as outras convicções, de apreciar a beleza do sagrado diferente. Numa sociedade democrática, enfim, as pessoas religiosas devem rezar e discutir os problemas sociais à luz de sua tradição e escrituras, atualizando e aprofundando valores humanos que, então, os seus líderes comunitários, lideranças políticas, podem, de forma autônoma e madura, e não em nome de igreja ou para uma igreja, traduzir em argumentos razoáveis para o debate público em favor do bem comum. Não é o caso de apadrinhamento particular com o governo por cima, mas de articulação por baixo na sociedade civil. Assim, se pode avançar na administração da diversidade e das suas controvérsias. Assim, a gente pode descobrir em diferentes sons e mantras religiosos um sonho humano comum. E passar do terceiro ausente ao terceiro incluído entre as fés, pelo compromisso ético com a justiça socioambiental na casa de todos, pelo silêncio místico que nos religa às fontes da vida. Somente assim, a diversidade espiritual deixa de ser vista como fruto de um pecado original e passa a ser acolhida como uma bênção das origens. Obrigado.
Thank you, Mr. Aragão.
Okay, thank you all of the presenters for such interesting insights. My name is Alejandro Williams. I'm from Argentina. I'm the Undersecretary of Socioeducational Policies at the government of Salta, a province in the north of the country. And my question is for Maria Lucia. I wanted to know how much did you succeed in getting to modify the curricula and the planning of contents, because I think that one of the most hard barriers in education is to get to accomplish that modifications that would guarantee the sustainability of these programs. That's the first question. And the second question is, which is the criteria that you privileged in selecting the schools which you worked within this program in these 5 countries that you mentioned yesterday? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Behind you. And then...
Ok, vou falar português. Muito obrigado. Eu sou Rudolf Fonsina, sou professor de teologia em Curitiba, Brasil. Agradeço muito ao painel pelo que foi trazido para nós, especialmente as experiências também concretas, que parecem muito se basear em encontros, simplesmente se encontrar, se conhecer, coisas muito simples, assim, trocar telefones, né, falar de coisas que são de interesse comum, que Paulo Freire também chamaria de convivialidade ou convivência, né? Então, isso é básico também, claro, nas religiões. Minha pergunta é, como a gente avança além, vamos dizer, de valores básicos, humanos, que são realmente básicos, para um conhecimento ou uma literacidade, como eu dizia, religiosa mais propriamente dito, porque parece uma informação sobre outras religiões, como também foi dito no painel anterior, de bullet points, né? Parece não trazer a riqueza daquilo que é uma religião. E, ao mesmo tempo, nós estamos, especialmente no Brasil, enfrentando muita resistência dos pais de saber sobre outras religiões porque temem que seus filhos vão se poluir, né, com o demônio. É bem assim que se diz, né? Então, como vocês trabalham, você, Maria Lúcia, mas também outros colegas, como vocês trabalham concretamente informação sobre religião? O que é isso? Como se pode aprender mutuamente? Obrigado.
Good morning. I am Neil Bacchus and I am from Guyana. I am the secretary of the Interreligious Organization of Guyana. Now, where we are in Guyana, it's a secular society, but I'm a bit curious. The end result in terms of education, especially when it comes to young people, is basically to create peace and harmony among themselves and not necessarily to be tolerant of each other. So where we stand now, if we were to develop literature in terms of helping to reach that end result of harmony and peace, should we create a literature on the grounds of the religious or interfaith, from an interfaith perspective, in that what each religion says about this, or perhaps create it from the perspective of a moral and ethical behavior book, where you coin now the similarity of each religion in that book to take it forward? Thank you.
Here.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Melody Amal Khalil Kabalam from Argentina, President of Islam for Peace Institute. First of all, thank you very much for all the speakers in this panel. It's really interesting. I would like to ask to our brothers from the Republic of Indonesia, since Indonesia is one of the most populated country in the world, and you have like an agenda regarding interfaith dialogue, especially for kids and young people throughout education. I have two questions. One is that, do you have like a metric, like if you are expecting like maybe in 2 decades or in how many years you will be the result for the interfaith dialogue in your society? Because I think it's very interesting. You are one of the country with most Muslim in the world. So I had the chance to visit your country and pray in Salatul Juma in the Jakarta Masjid, and in front there is just, crossing the street, there is a church. So I think is that there is like a metric and a perspective of in how many years you will see a special percent of your country be involved in the interfaith. And another one is that if there is any structure that you offer to the Muslim communities in non-Muslim countries. For example, let's say in Argentina, we have a really good background regarding interfaith dialogue, but in the case of the Muslim institution, Islamic institution, we don't have this kind of, let's say, a specific institution for dialogue throughout education as you represent. Okay, thank you very much. Jazakallah khairan, ya Rab.
Okay, anyone else? Another question? No? So I think that we can go to the answers, and I think that we can repeat the order. You first, and then the same order, the speeches.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, let me try to address some of the questions. First of all, for example, the concern from the parents, I think that's a real challenge as well. Speaking from our experience in dealing with the cross-cultural religious literacy program, because not only from the parents, because even from the teachers themselves, when they register to our program, learning about other religion from the other believers is actually a challenge for some of the people of the faith. Because for them, for example, for Christian teachers to register in our course, and then they know that in addition to learning more about Christianity, they are going to learn about Islam from an ulama. That's also there's already that barrier, because sometimes, I mean, these are the teachers themselves who, after taking the class, they told us that one of the things they are struggling, whether it is a sin or not for me to register for this course, because I'm going to learn about other religion. I mean, exactly as you said, because I think that's why when we measure the success of the program, even the fact that these teachers actually register and graduate from the course, because we have a criteria of the graduation, that's already an achievement, because they already take the first step of opening up. And then in terms of the whether we should create more literature about the moral, ethical books, and then maybe of peace. I think it's always very important to do that more and more, and especially from learning from different culture. But I think when speaking with in religion, especially in this digital age, I think what sometimes religious leaders may not realize is that the moral authority of religion is actually declining sometimes, because there are so many things, I mean, that people can see. So one of the principles that I think is very important here is that can we practice what we preach? So that's why practical example is very important. That's why we work together. For example, I mean, the gentleman here, Professor Mukti and Mr. Ali Mahfuz, they are our partners in this program, because we want to show to the teachers, we want to show to the kids that we're not just preaching about peace and collaboration, but we're actually working together on this. And then I think, let's see, in terms of the matrix, I mean, I think what we do with the matrix, we also use the matrix, but we do it differently, because what we do, I mean, there's a point about curriculum. So what we do in our program is that instead of introducing a new curriculum, because we know that teachers actually have a lot of freedom and authority in deciding what to teach in the classroom. So actually we work with the teachers so that they can still teach whatever they're teaching right now, but they can integrate these principles and maybe learn how to use a more positive examples of interacting with other faith into the courses that they are teaching. And to do that, we develop matrices. We develop matrices on how to help the teacher to see how they can integrate this principle into their courses. And then in terms of the structure, and then what we can learn to share with Argentina, for example, I think definitely there are more that my colleagues here from Indonesia can tell you more about that. But that's actually one of the ideas why we are doing the cross-cultural religious literacy, because we realize that this program can be a platform where we can work together. And then with this digital age, I think it's very important that we can use the online platform so that we can invite you, for example, to speak in our program. And then some of us can also speak into to the teachers and others in your country. And that's how we start the discussion, and that's how we exchange our experience. So we are very open to that, and we believe that the CCRL platform is actually one way that we can build this collaboration. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much. To some extent, the practice that we have in Indonesia, especially in relation to the experience of Muhammadiyah, are the product of what we call sociological and also theological approaches to make religion meaningful in the society. It is possible in the Indonesian context because Indonesia is neither secular nor theocratic country. I'd rather say Indonesia under the Pancasila as a secular religious state, meaning that the state is not based on a particular religion, but the state respects and protects and facilitates religions. Having this political system, Indonesia also has a very strong cultural traditions where people actually live peacefully in harmony. So when we develop literacy or religious literacy or cultural literacy, we bring the idea of cross-border, when people actually moving across their own environment or their own exclusive religion, by encouraging people to have meeting as much as they can. Here, schools could have at least two functions. First, school as a meeting point of people from different faith and different racial and cultural backgrounds. And second is the melting point in which they have the common responsibility and also common ground to make the society better, or what we call as common good. Here, then, what we encourage is not by preaching about other religion, but by developing what we call as learning through reading, by developing what we call cognitive approach in understanding others. Second, learning through meeting, which is social approach, when people can understand others by having meeting as one of the social encounter that enable them to understand others, then enable them to have personal proximity. And the third is learning through sharing, by having dialogue. This dialogue is possible if we encourage students to become an open mind, open heart, and then open doors for others. It is in this context then when we discuss about the experience of Muhammadiyah, for example, why Muhammadiyah give religion education according to the religion of the student is actually based on this principle. So in our school, Christian students studying Christianity taught by Christian religion education teachers. And as the experience of a nun who is studying in our university, she is Catholic. And she studied Catholicism taught by Catholic teachers. And this only possible when we understand religion as part of individual privilege and individual preference. And again, in this context, we need to accommodate others who are different from us, and not only tolerate others, but accept the existence of others as the key that we can live together and building an inclusive society.
Thank you. Alejandro, responding to your question about success in the curriculum, there have been several, but I have to tell you that, modifying curriculum is a very difficult task, and in particular, if you come externally to the country, it's always, you find a resistance from the country. However, in Kenya, we initiated a process back in 2014, where we initiated training of educators, just without working necessarily fully with the system, but with some educators doing some pilot workshops. Then we continued the process, and at that time, the government of Kenya, the ministry, initiated the review of the curriculum, which was very timely, because of course those processes cannot be forced. So it just happened that they were doing the review of the curriculum, and then there was an interest that the curriculum would have, apart from competency framework and other frameworks, a value-based education framework. And Arigato International was invited with another organization to provide expertise. So during this process, we trained the curriculum developers, we trained the different units that were in charge of the process to ensure that the values-based education would be integrated with the approach of Arigato, which is the learning to live together and ensuring that respect for diversity and so on is there. So this process took place. Kenya now has a curriculum that has a value-based education and integrates several of the aspects of our materials. During this process, after the pandemic, once the curriculum are developed, they need to be tested and then implemented at the national level. This process has not happened thoroughly in Kenya, and now that we are engaged in this process with the Ministry of Education again, we are working closely with the Kenyan Institute for Curriculum Development to see how we can integrate it, looking at materials and so on. It's a long process, but I think it is a success story in the sense that we have managed to influence that this part is part of the curriculum. Then in Indonesia, and you just mentioned the Pancasila. Pancasila are these 5 principles of the constitution that they are secular, but they are very much inviting to respect the other, believe in one God, and so on. And through the work we are doing in Indonesia, we are working to integrate it in what they call the Pancasila student profile. They are taking the principles of the Constitution in the education and creating a student profile. So the children learn about this. But we are taking the step forward. What does this mean? To create and ensure that education is more inclusive of the other, that the respect for diversity is there, and so on. So we are working with educators to train them in the Pancasila student profile and integrate it through the different modules that we have created. And additionally to this, we are working for the moment in the other countries where we are working. We cannot see the results yet because now there have been a commitment to this. But what I can say is that, for example, in Mauritius, we have managed to develop a national teacher training program that is now part of the pre-service and in-service of the teachers in the entire country. So I think that's another success story. In terms of the families and working with parents and so on, so that's another learning in the process because parents get nervous when you bring children to different religious visits and so on. So with the Ministries of Education, we are working to do introductory sessions to the parents, and in a way, the process that we have seen also is that when we engage the religious leaders and religious communities, that is already a green light for the parents. So when we bring the children to different religious communities and the parents know that they went to their own religious community and those religious leaders were okay that they were doing the interreligious visits, it's in a way okay when you engage your own religious community. And as I said, our process is on ethics education. So we are not telling parents that we are teaching religion, we are teaching about common values and shared in different religious denominations, and that in a way helps the process as well. So I will leave it there and we can comment.
Então, quanto ao currículo, no Brasil nós temos o que ensinar, porque fruto da militância de muitos educadores, a Base Nacional Curricular considera o ensino religioso de maneira pluralista. O currículo não é mais organizado por teólogos de igrejas, mas pelos cientistas da religião com temas transversais em torno da experiência religiosa. Agora, às vezes, na prática, a teoria é outra, porque falta formação e falta material didático para que isso chegue em termos de projetos de pesquisa no chão da escola. Na falta disso, os professores deixam de ensinar o catecismo de uma igreja e passam a ensinar o catecismo de várias igrejas. E isso não muda a vida das crianças, elas têm que partir dos problemas da vida e aí a experiência religiosa tem que ser terapeutizada no sentido da vida se tornar mais humana. Nós lá no Observatório Transdisciplinar das Religiões, tentando colaborar nessa fase agora, criamos uma série de vídeos, 30 vídeos, sobre as 30 principais religiões do nosso entorno. Visitamos, entrevistamos, gravamos celebrações e trouxemos para a universidade, onde mostramos, pedimos correções das pessoas que vivenciam aquilo. Então, isso está sendo muito usado como material pelos professores de ensino religioso. Nessa fase agora, a gente está querendo dar um passo. Como é que a gente pode avançar? Não só mostrar cada religião, mas juntá-las, sobretudo aquelas que têm dificuldade de convivência. Por exemplo, Dia da Consciência Pagã, um casarão cheio de bruxa. Nós levamos lá um rapaz evangélico e uma freira católica, entrevistamos na saída, empurramos para dentro, deixamos uma filmagem rodando e, no final, para nossa surpresa, saíram vivos. Inclusive, o pastor Batista convidou a bruxa e a freira para ir lá dar um testemunho. Foi mostrado na Igreja Batista. A Igreja Católica não chegou a tanto, mas isso está no nosso site e inspira muita gente a fazer visitas para passar um dia junto com uma outra comunidade de fé. O que inspira a gente nessa metodologia? A gente trabalha com a transdisciplinaridade, que é a metodologia principal do pensamento complexo. Nicolescu, Edgar Morin. Então, É a lógica do terceiro incluído. Em que sentido? Religiões diferentes conseguem dar passos no sentido de se apreciarem e se encontrarem quando tem, por exemplo, uma escola, a universidade, não como espaço neutro, mas como um entrelugar. Homi Bhabha, a antropologia do Homi Bhabha. Quer dizer, por cima da cerca a gente pode conversar e construir a partir não só das semelhanças, mas também do entendimento das diferenças. Terceiro incluído também na questão de que duas religiões avançam em termos de diálogo, não quando assim se entendem um pouco mais e passam a jogar confete uma na outra, mas quando descobrem, entre e para além delas, uma causa comum, a questão ética, da justiça socioambiental, a dimensão mística do silêncio que deve nos reunir. Então, é esse terceiro espaço que pode promover um diálogo mais aprofundado. Obrigado.
Thank you all. Since we are relatively on time, our co-moderator, Mr. Halim Mahfouz, would like to address a question to the members of the panel.
Thank you. Learning from Indonesia experience, I think there are very, very basic understanding that we need to understand and need to really to follow up, particularly in terms of the communication. An experience from Argentina, but how the parents sometimes has concern about that kind of communication, how a children can learn other religion. That's not only in Argentina, in Indonesia also. In Indonesia, that's not only for the parents, even for the people, for the believers themselves. There's still a gap or misunderstanding about how to understand other religion, and then that creates another misperception and misconception about other religion. And this is the important thing here. The key is how we can communicate in terms of making that religion is not only our colleagues from Kenya yesterday said that religion is not teaching only how to go to heaven, but how to live today. I think that's very in Islam, there's a wording from Al-Quran that's saying that all mankind, you have been created male and female, and then people and tribes to know each other. That is something that we miss the point, how to build mutual understanding between people and other people. So now my question here is number one, particularly, you have been a lot of experience in building this, but how do you use the communication tools to spread your good message, particularly in using social media? Because as I understand, if your teaching, your learning for the teachers can be broadcasted in more strategic way, and then with very chronological items, we can make people understand. I think that's going to be very impactful. And also that I haven't heard from of your representation is the role of the government or authorities institution. What is the role of Minister of Education in Indonesia? How do they facilitate your education for the? Thank you.
Thank you. I would only ask you to answer in 1 or 2 minutes in order to keep the respect to the time. And I think that we also can repeat the order of the...
Well, I think responding to Mr. Mahfouz, I think thank you. Those will be in the list of our homework that we will continue to discuss. But I think I want to emphasize, I think it's true that communication is very important because so the religious literacy, the focus is actually how we can build communication and then building relation with people who are different from us. Because I think what we are seeing in the world right now, the division, polarization, it starts with the lack of communication, and then that's how you build your exclusivity, and because you only talk to the people who are the same group with you, and that's what you need to work together to break that. So I think from Indonesia, I think from what we have an experience with the cross-cultural religious literacy, and I'm sure also with our partners in Indonesia, we are always ready to communicate and collaborate with all of you in this event, so that we can learn together on how to build this relation and try to fight any kind of phobia that is rising in the world right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Following the importance of communication, as Pak Kiai mentioned before, that the key that we could, let's say, reduce misconception or misperception and misunderstanding is by allowing people to know each other better. It is in the Quran. It is stated with the term lita'arafu. Lita'arafu does not mean that we know people from their names or nationality and so on, but to know people better by knowing and having positive perception about others. And in this context, I'd rather in line with the theory, namely the theory of encounter. When people have more meeting with others, then they will have better understanding about others. And this meeting is actually psychologically could bring what I called before the reality that we have our personal proximity. If we have personal proximity, then we can start to have a joke, we can start to have fun, and so on and so forth. Therefore, when we discuss about inclusive society and also building harmony, especially when it's come to religion, then again we need to encourage people, especially young generation, to have more meeting in a very natural way. The meeting that allow them to ask questions, and the meeting that allow them to share their experience. And it is in this context that might be necessary for the government to provide more public access or public arena when people from different background could meet each other and share each other in a very cultural and in a very natural way.
Thank you so much for this great question. And I would think of the question of communications in two ways. I think communications at the national level, at the local level, when we are doing these programs with the parents and so on, and so that type of communication. In Seychelles, they have done a very interesting process because the Ministry of Education has contacted media, and they have been doing every week some radio shows and programs on TV to talk about ethics and the importance of learning to live together in a society that is majority Catholic, and what it means for the minorities and religious diversity and cultural diversity. So I think partnering with media is an important aspect of communicating the message and reaching to the parents and caregivers in different ways. In Seychelles was interesting because we got opposition from the Catholic Church when we started to work with the program. And I went to Seychelles and I talked to the bishop of the Catholic Church. And he wanted to understand because he thought that introducing ethics in the country would be replacing religious education, because the Catholic Church has an agreement with the country that Catholicism is taught in the schools. And so there was a lot of dialogue, and after I left, there were different meetings held with the Interreligious Council in Seychelles also, and then slowly they have been taking part of the process and in organizing interreligious visits and so on. So I think that's important of communication with the high-level religious leaders and also using media. And the other communication perhaps is an invitation. I think we all are working on this topic, and some of you in the audience are also also trying to bring a message about the importance of interreligious education through ethics education or others. And I think we need to be more outspoken. This event is a great opportunity. We want to bring this message to G20. What else do we need to do to bring to the other countries, and how we can join efforts to maybe webinars, regional meetings, and others that can bring this message in a more powerful way with the evidence, but also showing the collaborative efforts. Thank you.
Então, na educação formal, demos passos no Brasil, como eu relatei, mas a educação é uma coisa mais ampla, inclui os meios de comunicação, sobretudo. E aí a gente vive no Brasil uma guerra cultural, religiosa, uma religião tentando superar a outra, apesar de no mesmo espectro do cristianismo. E no meio disso, no entanto, a gente também tem conseguido andar. Por exemplo, um cidadão entrou na justiça dizendo a rede pública de comunicação no Brasil, no domingo, transmitia uma missa e depois, por pressão evangélica, passou a transmitir também um culto. E ele disse, eu sou ateu e o meu imposto não pode ir para apresentar isso para os meus filhos no domingo pela manhã. E o Ministério Público convidou a gente que fazia parte de um Comitê Nacional de Respeito à Diversidade Religiosa, no então Ministério dos Direitos Humanos, e a gente assessorou um acordo que foi feito, levando a rede pública de comunicação no Brasil a criar uma linha de diversidade religiosa. Deixou de transmitir a missa e o culto e passou a criar dois programas. Um em que cada religião se apresentava, então tem 40 religiões que foram filmadas pelas suas lideranças e teólogos, e isso é transmitido pelo Brasil afora. E outro, um programa chamado Entre o Céu e a Terra, em que se dramatiza uma experiência bonita ou uma experiência difícil, a questão da morte, ou a questão do encontro amoroso, etc. E, em cima dessa dramatização, pessoas de várias religiões dizem o que a sua religião pensa, e estudiosos de religião comentam, né, essa possibilidade da religiosidade ajudar a gente a se humanizar. Então, é um exemplo concreto de como as comunicações podem ajudar no sentido de uma educação mais ampla. Obrigado.
Thank you very much to you all, and I think that I can do a little concluding remarks, and I would like to say, after listening actively to your speeches and your answers, I would like to address one expression that I think is created by or developed by another Brazilian philosopher. We talk about Paulo Freire, but I would like to introduce the work of Rubem Alves, who is another really important philosopher, which used to be a religious minister, and he tells us about the importance and the value of the active listening. I think that all kinds of fruitful, or all the possibilities of a fruitful dialogue starts with an active listening. We don't debate, we don't talk, we don't chat, we don't argue when we are concerning or we are trying to speak. If we are trying to speak, we are not talking. We are trying to convince. We are trying to overcome, and that's not the point. I think that we have, first of all, learn how to listen the other, because only if we listen and only if we understand by listening, we will be able to give them our attention, our thoughts, and then address our opinion, our position. So I think that after all what had been said here, I think that's the lesson. We have to learn how to listen. And I would like to thank you all once again. I think that it was a really good panel. As we are talking before, I think that this is the key panel of this event because deals about the practical aspects of everything that we have been discussing. And I would, for me, it was a pleasure. It was a time for learning and to listening actively your opinions. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the audience, for all the questions. Good morning.